Have you ever doubted yourself? Have others doubted you? Doubts can be discouraging, huh? Yes, criticism and skepticism cannot be avoided. Someone will always say, it can't be done. Sometimes that voice is yours. Doubting Thomas was the pessimist on Jesus' team. However, Jesus specializes in the impossible. He trained Tom to help him see hope when it seemed hopeless and to have faith when he was faithless. Yep, doubts are real, but so is the peace and confidence that comes to those who trust and believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Here are some scriptures that include Tom. John 11, 1 through 16, and verse 43 to 44. Now, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us go also, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Unbind him and let him go. John 14, 1 through 6. This is after Jesus told them he was going to die and go away. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you? that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." John 20:24-29. This is after Jesus' resurrection. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of his nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Wow. When Jesus' friend Lazarus got sick, it seemed like Jesus did nothing, and then Lazarus died. Though Jesus fully knew what he was doing and how God was going to be glorified and honored, those around him really struggled. You see, it is ordinary to struggle, fear, be anxious, and have doubts. Jesus' entire team of disciples were afraid for their own lives to go back to the Jerusalem area where Lazarus and his sisters lived. Yet Tom was the one who consented to going, even though his response kind of dripped with sarcasm. "Let's go! I guess we're all going to die." Even Lazarus' sisters, in their deep pain, questioned Jesus. We don't know and understand all God does, and life can be confusing and hard at times. But being Jesus trained means to have courage to face those fears and fight to trust that he knows best and that he is the God of the impossible. This is the first lesson from Tom. Face fears, find hope. And what was that hope? Get this. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. A dead man walked out of a tomb. They got to witness it. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Then weeks later, Jesus did the same thing. He rose from the dead. And he promises to give us resurrection someday too. Do you believe this? Are you full of hope? Or are you letting doubts and fears cloud your faith? Part of being Jesus trained is that he gives us challenging tests to see if we really are willing to trust and obey him. And the bottom line is that Christians have every reason to be optimists. We can have courage and face our fears on and off a wrestling mat because he is the God of miracles and the God of the impossible. The second lesson from Tom comes from when Jesus tried to prepare his team of disciples for his death. And let me tell you, they were really worried and anxious. You see, the reality of death is quite troubling to many people. But instead of being troubled by death and the separation it causes, Jesus trained Tom and the rest of the disciples to not be troubled, but to focus on the future reality of living with God in his house that has plenty of space. Here is where Tom spoke up because he wanted clarity and he didn't want to miss it. How do we get there? How can we know? Jesus simply told him that he was the only way to God. The truth is, no one else has the answer for eternity. And the way of Jesus brings abundant life. So the second lesson of how to face our doubts from Tom is to ask questions and get answers. In your fears and anxiety, dig in and look for answers. Many people don't like to talk about death, but Jesus did and gave incredible answers of hope, comfort, and encouragement. Do you know Jesus as the way to God? I mean, what can get better than living in God's house for eternity and knowing Jesus is the way to get there? He is the way, He is the truth, and He is the way of abundant eternal life. So what are you struggling with? Seek, and you will find, Jesus said. Another way to put it is, knock, and the door will be open to you. Ask questions, get answers. The same applies to your wrestling in life. Ask your coaches, ask your teachers, ask your parents, and look for answers. But most importantly, ask God and read His Word, the Bible. God is in the business of giving us confidence and hope, but you have to be willing to seek if you're going to find. The last lesson we learned from Tom comes from when he got his nickname, Doubting Thomas. Tom was the last of Jesus' disciples to see Him after His resurrection. Tom brashly said, "Unless I can see and feel His scars, I won't believe." Then guess what? Jesus showed up and told him to see, feel, believe, and have peace. And that is just what Tom did. You know, at some point, you just have to believe. It is good to face fears, ask questions, but if you want peace, you gotta believe. This is the third lesson from Tom. Believe and find peace. Everyone is at a different place, and everyone will have a different level of truth that they need for belief. But at some point, each person must decide whether or not they will commit to the way of Jesus. At some point, you are in or out. Neutral is not an option. Tom needed a bit of extra proof, but Jesus commended those who haven't seen and still believe. This is called faith. Believing what we do know, even though we don't see all the answers. Let me say that again. This is called faith. Believing what we do know, even though we don't see all the answers. Each one of us has a choice. Swim in our doubts and fears, or lean in, get answers, and find peace. The same lessons apply to the anxiety that wrestlers face. Who am I going to wrestle? How good is he? What if I make a mistake? Guys, face your fears and find confidence. Ask questions of coaches, inquire about technique and strategy, and get answers that can give you hope for your dreams. And lastly, you have to believe in the potential that God has given you and commit to being who He made you to be. Each of us is at a different place, but the peace of God is available in our hearts and minds for all those willing to accept and believe. This concludes Tom, the Pessimist, Episode 8 of the Extraordinary Jesus Train series.